On today's Faith versus Culture, we're talking about revenge porn, a new law to fight it, and why Christians ought to care about it. That and more is coming up.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to this week's episode of Faith versus Culture. I'm Goins-Phillips. I'm here with Joshua Broome. Josh, welcome. How are you?
Always great to be hanging out with you, man.
Well, it's good to see you here today on Faith versus Culture. So there's a new bill heading to President Donald Trump's desk, the Take It Down Act. This is something that you have been advocating for now for half a decade.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a brief rundown of what this law does? Catch us up to speed. And why is it something that you've been so personally passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, so my story of being in the adult film industry kind of plays my hand to, utilize the story in which God has given me to speak into culture in a unique way. And part of that industry is that each person in that industry faces the same thing systematically that one would face regarding trafficking, and that force, fraud, coercion is the basis or the foundation from which that organization functions through. And a big part of that is each person that does that content, they're an independent contractor, and you waive all rights of any kind of intellectual property, anything that was captured that day, video, audio, imagery. And it's not just used for what it was filmed for. It's sold to infinite numbers of third parties. And, while I, upon my own volition, said yes to filming that scene, what I didn't say yes to was being a spokesperson for, performance enhancing products or toys or billboards advocating for this or dating sites. And I think we live in a time where people love reactionary content or to borrow people's content, and intellectual property is somewhat vague in some ways. But what we're seeing is because of the utilization of AI, innocent people are having images that they put on public platforms, and it's being obstructed or manipulated in a way that is being sexualized. And not only sexualized, it's being monetized. So, I mean, that is like the big kicker. So, I mean, Ellie, a 15-year-old girl that was completely innocent, who just posted a picture of her at the beach in a sundress that completely covered her body. A few students at her school manipulated that picture, utilizing free AI technology, and shared nudes of her all over AI. Was that her? No. But it certainly looked like her, and it was so realistic that people believed that it was her. And she and her family started fighting this, and this is kind of where that fight started. But the Take It Down Act is saying, hey, you will be held legally responsible if you do this, and sites that don't have clear consent, sites that don't have clear consent, if you don't have that from each and every person that's involved in that imagery, they are demanded to take that down, or they will face legal ramifications.
So from a biblical standpoint, obviously we should all know why this is important, but as
Sure.
Christians, why is it critical that we address this issue? Not only the revenge pornography side of it, but as you said, because of artificial intelligence, some of this stuff can be created that is completely artificial. It never actually happened. There's deep fake exploitation happening too. So talk about, from a Christian perspective, why it's critical for us to be vigilant and hyperactive in combating this evil stuff happening.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it's multifaceted in that because you have the person that is completely innocent, and they are, they get their image taken and manipulated, and they had no part to play in this. But then you have the other person, for example, like my friend Victoria. She was dating someone. She went to Vegas upon her own volition, but then she was drugged and she ended up having sex with this person. But that sex was filmed, and not only was that sex filmed, that content then ended up on a porn website, and that scene got broken up into many parts, and that it got eventually monetized. She had no idea it was on there. It was on there for years. And then when she found out that it was, because someone sent it to her, all of a sudden it started to fluctuate and she lost her job, and she was really struggling with her mental health. So either the person that was completely innocent, or the person that they had put themselves in a situation that would not be optimal, but they didn't give the consent for their imagery or that video to be used in that way. I think we live in this culture that is narrated by pornography that over-sexualizes our culture. So to the same person that would say, this college student that was sexually assaulted, that wouldn't have happened if they wouldn't have been dressed that way. That thinking doesn't come from a heart that is surrendered and submitted to the person of Jesus. What's true is, well, the heart of that person that assaulted that girl, that is the problem. It's not how she's dressed. It's not, we can have a different conversation regarding modesty, but that person was innocent. So I would say, just to factor in the whole mentality of cancel culture, where we're seeing things pop up that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it just, it removes everything that was good that was done over that period. So I think it's just this weird, gray area where we don't know how to operate. But again, as followers of Jesus, well, we want to protect the innocent. I would say, like, that's where, like, men need to step up in our culture. Like, why does policy matter? Because people matter at the end of the day. So if something's in the public square, it's called to be regulated. That's why I have, like, such a big issue with age verification, where we have Free Speech Coalition challenging the legislation that exists in Texas around age verification. And they're saying this is an infringement on our First Amendment rights. No, it's not. Alcohol is governed. Tobacco,
right?
Governed.
We regulate
our movies. Yeah,
right.
governed.
We regulate so many things in our society, but porn has become this sacred cow that I think so many people don't want to step in and put these regulations on because it's an infringement on my rights to privacy. But what about the rights to privacy of the victim, right? Especially when we're not just dealing, unfortunately, with men and women who are being exploited. We're dealing with girls and boys who are being exploited, which is completely outside of their control, especially when it is a deep fake, it is an artificially manipulated image. So there are several states now that do have age verification laws in place, but talk about why it's so critical that these laws be put in place. Yeah,
I mean, number one, when you put something in the public square, you're called to be, you have to protect people from others and themselves, and especially when it's viable danger. And we see from significant data that neurologically to a child, pornography is detrimental. It's detrimental to all people. We see the damage that it does on your prefrontal cortex. It minimizes your ability to have impulse control, and you find yourself not only not being able to not watch porn, but you struggle to make difficult decisions regarding fight or flight. But I just want to back up and just say, just thinking about, well, what's the real danger? Like, why is this so important? Well, because pornography is so accessible, what's happening today, because we've talked already about teenage girls getting pictures augmented and then put on different websites. Like, that in itself is problematic. But another thing that's happening in an astronomical tick is that there's people who create fictitious accounts on social media, and then they will converse with young men, and it will be, a pretty girl trying to talk to, a teenage boy, and then they will ask them to send a nude photo, and then once the young man does, they say, okay, I got you. I'm going to send this to everyone you know. They're a hacker, so they've got access to everyone they follow, emails, all this stuff. And if you don't give me X amount of dollars, I'm going to expose you. And we are seeing these kids commit suicide at an astronomical rate, and it's in the 80th percentile. It's young men. So the girls are being, their photos are being augmented, and that's problematic. But also for young men, because porn is so prolific and so accessible, there's this thinking, because you don't in your right mind send a nude photo of yourself to someone unless you do not understand sexual ethic. Even outside of following Jesus, I don't think that unless you've consumed pornography and you have this misguided, disordered view of sex, you don't think in your mind that a person you've never met, and you've only talked to them on the internet a few times, it makes sense for you to send an image of your private parts to. But this is something that pornography, it augments your ability to discern how to govern my body and what I believe sex is and what I believe sex is for. So again, that's why it's so problematic, and that's why it's so important for there to be legitimate legislation in place to protect kids from themselves, and also to help to hold people accountable when they manipulate and harm others in a very drastic way.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much more to discuss about this issue because it's so prevalent in our society, unfortunately. So we have a lot more to talk with Joshua Broome about. Everybody stick with us. We're going to fit in a quick break. Welcome back to Faith versus Culture here on the CBN News Channel. We're joined by Josh Broome. Josh, you have a history in the porn industry that the Lord has redeemed you out of. That gives you an interesting vantage point, I think, to this issue. But another way that you have an interesting and I think important vantage point is that you are a father. You're starting to see how are my kids going to interact with social media? How are they going to be involved in the internet? And with so many risks out there, I know that there are so many parents who are listening to this conversation or watching this episode, and they're wondering, as a mom, as a dad, how can I step in and guide and protect my kids in this digital world where there are so many threats available to them?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that average age of exposure to pornography has gone from 11 to 8 years old, and it was 11 years old because that was the average age that kids were getting a cell phone. And because of homeschooling and because of the way in which technology is utilized, so most kids are interacting with an iPad, so that barrier to entry regarding their age is gotten even lower. So for us and for everyone out there, we have to know that it's not if, it's when your kids come across some kind of sexualized content. Because I'll put my pastor hat on for a moment. It's like when you're talking about pornography, porneia is a word. So porn comes from porneia. Porneia is a word from the Greek New Testament. It's talking about sexual imagery, where this was etched on walls in Mesopotamia, 1,000 years before Christ was even born. And sexual immorality, we look at church history, we look at Corinth, we look at Ephesus, this is not a new thing. So as the accessibility and the normative nature of sex that lives in our culture, because pornography is not just something you find on a hardcore website. It's on Instagram, it's on Twitter, it's on, TikTok, and it's on every show that you would watch on Netflix for the most part. So how can we govern what our kids are watching? Well, number one, we need to know what they're watching. And number two, we need to safeguard them. So Bark is really great technology that You can monitor what your kids watch. It allows you to be notified when there's any language regarding bullying, any kind of self-harm, any of those things. You're notified but like they don't know that you're notified, so you can have a conversation that's not accusatory. You can, ask questions and invite a conversation. That's a much more healthy way to operate. But just know that if you have a smart device in your home, it needs to be locked down. You need to look at the settings. You need to have some kind of software on any kind of computer, phone, iPad, anything they're using, because porn is not something you have to look for because it's looking for you. So as a dad, it's responsible for me to, number one, what I don't say says something. So even my six-year-old knows, what private parts are, and private parts are not to be seen by others, and he shouldn't see other people's private parts. There's a great book, Good Book, Bad Pictures, that just talks about, hey, there's this understanding that there is imagery on TV and in books that you should not see. And in the same way, if you're scared, you come to mom and dad. If you're hurt, you come to mom and dad. If you see something that you should not see, that is bad. That doesn't make you bad. But please come with your confusion and your questions. Come to me and let's have a conversation about it. Because as a parent, number one, you're called to protect your kids, and we live in a reality where this stuff is everywhere. So we should be being proactive and safeguard our kids against it. And also, we need to tell them that this is in an age appropriate way. We need to tell them, hey, there's stuff that you might see, or you might be, showed by a friend or something that is not good. But if you see it, that doesn't mean that you are bad or you are in trouble. But bring those questions and confusions to me, and let's process them together. Because if there's not a precedent set where you're not going to get in trouble if you see this and something's not said, because that is the thing that's most problematic in the church, because there hasn't been we don't talk about it.
We're not open to talking about it. And I think that's what's so important too, is that Satan works in half truths, right? So your desire for sexuality and your desire for the opposite sex, or your arousal at something, especially in those formative years as early teen years, like that is completely normal and healthy. And Satan is looking to manipulate something that is completely normal and healthy in a perverted way. So I think as a parent having those conversations, and as a church being open to have those conversations, we need the body of Christ to come around us and equip us with these things so that we can be successful, in kicking pornography in particular as a habit, because we know that it's not healthy. So everybody stick with us. We'll be right back with more of Faith versus Culture with Josh Broome. Welcome back to Faith versus Culture here with Josh Broome. Josh, as we're rounding out this conversation on this all important issue that's kind of it's just such a monster issue in our culture. It's hard to kind of wrap it up in just a few minutes. But to kind of close out the conversation, I want to ask you, as somebody who's been where you've been to where you are now and seen the Lord move in your life, how have you seen the providence of God really, really play out in bringing you to this point in your life?
Yeah, I think about Romans 8:28, where God's going to use all things, for His good and mine, for His glory. And I think it's when we are willing to surrender all of our lives, not 99% of it, but all of our lives, and even the messiness of our past, God stands ready to do exceedingly abundantly more than we could ever hope, dream, or imagine. And that's just who He is. And what I've seen is someone who grew up without a dad, who made a lot of bad choices and did things that I never thought I would do. I've seen the hand of God both heal me, restore me, and give me the capability and capacity to do things that I never had the guts to dream. And it's no shock to Him. So I would just say to the person that feels like they're too far gone, or they have to stay stuck where they are because of what either they did or what happened to them, that doesn't have to be your story. And it makes me think specifically of Psalms 84. Psalms 84 talks about towards the end, God does not withhold good things from those who walk in integrity. And integrity is not something that I can only have it because I've had a life committed to walking in integrity, or I've always been honest. And regarding purity too, purity is not something that you lose. It's a posture that you can start today. You can say, hey, today is the day that I'm going to start walking in integrity. Today is the day that I'm going to start walking in purity. And all you got to do is do the next right thing, and God's going to meet you tomorrow. His mercies are renewed every morning. So today, draw a line in the sand. Just because of how I grew up, just because of my family history, just because of whatever has happened to me, whatever I've done, that doesn't have to impact my tomorrow. I can say today is the day the Lord has made. I'm going to be glad in it, and I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to trust that He's going to give me the strength that I don't have to do what I can't accomplish tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, Josh, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate you being here. For people who want to know more about you, to get more information about the AACC, where can they go?
Yeah, so my website, so joshuabroome.me. You can find that SART course. You can find the P51 project, and buy my book, 7 Lies That'll Rule Your Life, that me and my buddy Billy Hollowell wrote. And I would say I just had a huge interview come out with Sean Ryan. So that episode drops this Thursday. And again, regarding social media, I am Joshua Broome on every platform. My website, joshuabroome.me.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being here. And everybody, stick with us. We'll be right back to wrap up this week's episode. Thank you so much for being here today. That's all the time we have for this week's episode. If you want more news from a Christian perspective, check out cbnnews.com, and also subscribe to our Quick Start podcast. It goes out every weekday morning. Again, thanks for being here, and God bless you.